It happened a week ago. I was 32 and wanted to escape. I drove into the woods, looking for a break after a tough project. I figured a cabin would help me recharge. I wasn't an expert in camping, but I had spent time alone in cabins before. It felt good to be back in nature, though I was a little nervous. The cabin was cozy when I arrived. Old books filled the shelves, and the decorations looked odd but interesting. I set up my things and made a cup of tea. Outside, I could hear birds and the rustling of leaves. It felt peaceful. That first night, things started to change. I was in bed, ready to sleep, when I heard soft thuds from above. I thought it was the cabin settling. It was probably just the wind. My heart raced a little, but I told myself not to worry. I tried to write, but I only stared at the blank page. As the days passed, the thuds didn't stop. They came at strange hours, like something or someone was up there. Maybe it was just my imagination, but it made the silence feel heavy. The second night, I stayed up late and opened one of the old books. I hoped it would help me focus. I found strange notes scribbled in the margins. I couldn't tell if they were jokes or something serious. It felt uneasy, but I convinced myself it was just someone being quirky. Still, it stuck in my mind. One evening, I saw something flying between the trees. It was quick, like a shadow. I rubbed my eyes and felt a chill. My gut told me I wasn't alone. The longer I stared outside, the more it felt like something was watching me. I shivered. Was it all in my head? Then I started to hear muffled voices. At first they were soft whispers, but they grew louder. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of them. I couldn't sleep anymore. The more I listened, the more I felt pulled toward the sounds. Maybe I was losing my mind. I thought about leaving the next day, but a part of me wanted to know what was happening. On my last night, I gathered my courage. I stood in the cabin center and shouted, "Who's there?" I waited. Nothing answered, except my own breath. Then I heard a response, faint, but there. A whisper so low I couldn't understand. My skin crawled. I wished I had left earlier. The thuds grew louder. A cold breeze swept through the room. I turned and my heart stopped. I felt a presence, but no one was there. The whispers surrounded me. They were all around, growing clearer, but still too soft to understand. I thought about running, but something held me in place. I felt like I could see something flickering in the corner of my eye. I turned, my breath caught in my throat, and then it was gone. Just silence, but the whispers kept coming. They never stopped. I woke up the next morning feeling drained. The whispers had kept me up all night, swirling around me like shadows. I grabbed my things, ready to leave the cabin behind. The forest felt more oppressive than before. I needed to get back to my car, to the safety of the world beyond the trees.
As I stepped outside, something caught my eye. It was a small notebook lying on the porch, half hidden under a pile of leaves. I didn't remember seeing it before, and curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up and wiped it free of dirt. The cover was faded, with no title. When I opened it, I found page after page filled with hurried handwriting. Doodles and strange symbols decorated the margins. I felt a chill. The note seemed to be about the very cabin I was standing in, detailing strange sounds and sightings. One entry mentioned a shadow passing by the windows at night. Another warned of a presence that could be felt but not seen. I glanced around, suddenly feeling exposed. Had someone else experienced the same things I had? I kept reading, and it mentioned a specific place in the woods, a clearing nearby, known locally as the sorrow spot. A knot formed in my stomach. I felt like I should go, but another part of me insisted I followed this lead. I hesitated, but made my way deeper into the forest. My heart pounded in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying. The sun filtered through the branches, but the shadows felt longer than before. I took slow steps, my mind racing. What if the whispers and the thuds were connected to this clearing? After what felt like hours, I reached a small glade. It was quiet, the air heavy with expectation. I scanned the area and noticed a large stone in the center, covered in strange markings that resembled the ones from the notebook. My breath quickened. This couldn't be a coincidence. I inched closer, and the moment my hand brushed against the stone, a sharp sound pierced the air, a shrill cry that echoed through the trees. It felt like the forest itself reacted. Panic surged through me, and I spun around. The clearing was still empty, but the weight of the air felt different now. Then I heard it again, but this time it was accompanied by laughter, high-pitched, a chorus of voices swirling around me, mocking and eerie. I stumbled back, my heart racing. The whispers from the cabin returned, now overlaying the laughter, creating a chaotic cacophony that left me disoriented. What was this place? I had to get out. As I turned to run, I felt a presence behind me. I glanced over my shoulder, but no one was there. Yet the laughter grew louder, surrounding me like a storm. My legs moved on instinct, pushing through the underbrush. I should have turned back, but something was drawing me deeper, pulling me in closer to whatever this was. I had to find out. And that's when I saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the clearing, shrouded in shadow. It looked like it was watching me. I froze in place, paralyzed by fear. It was time to confront whatever was haunting me. I stood there, frozen, my breath caught in my throat. The figure was indistinct, blurred at the edges like a mirage. My instincts screamed at me to run, to escape, but an invisible force held me in place. "Who are you?"
I dared to ask, my voice barely a whisper. It felt strange to speak to something I couldn't fully see, but I needed answers. The figure shifted slightly, and the whispers morphed. They began to mimic my question, repeating it in mocking tones. My heart raced. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. Was it responding? Just then, it moved closer to the stone, stepping into the dim light filtering through the trees. A moment later, the laughter stopped. Silence hung heavy, almost palpable. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe it couldn't harm me. But that hope quickly faded when I saw its eyes. They were dark, hollow, devoid of any color. They seemed to pull me in, and I felt a rush of dread that twisted in my gut. I took a step back, my instinct to flee overcoming my curiosity. "Get away!" I shouted, turning on my heel and finally breaking free from whatever held me captive. I crashed through the underbrush, branches clawing at me as I sprinted down the narrow path. My legs moved faster than I thought possible, fueled by fear and the burning need to escape that clearing. But the laughter erupted again. It followed me, echoing through the trees. My pulse quickened, and my breaths came in sharp gasps. I thought of the notebook, the warnings, the presence that others had felt. What did it want from me? With each step, I felt the woods closing in around me. The tall trees cast long shadows, making me feel small and helpless. I stumbled down the path, desperately searching for the way back to the cabin. I had to get back to the car. I could outrun this, but could I escape its grip? Abruptly, the laughter changed, turning sinister. It transformed into a chant, a rhythm that enveloped me. I felt it echoing in my ears, in my mind. "The sorrow spot, they chanted, a melody that felt ancient and doomed. Then, without warning, I tripped over a root, crashing to the ground. Pain shot through my knee, but I pushed myself back up. Adrenaline surged, and I bolted forward, heart racing, every instinct telling me to keep moving. I had to warn someone, anyone, but who would believe me? I pressed on, a mix of exhaustion and panic propelling me toward the cabin, the chaos behind me somehow catching up. That's when I realized something else was following, a shadow gliding through the trees, close but still hidden from view. It moved with purpose, determined. I was not alone. Whatever I had encountered in the clearing wasn't ready to let me go. I reached the cabin and fumbled for the door, fear clawing at my insides. I slammed it shut behind me, locking it tight. I leaned against it, panting, but I knew it wasn't over. I could still hear the laughter, still feel the shadows lurking outside. Then the whispers returned, but now they were louder, clearer. They weren't just echoes, they were warning me. "You've awakened it," they said. "You must stop it before it finds you." I was out of time. I had to figure out what to do next.
The cabin felt suffocating. The walls, once a source of comfort, now loomed over me like a prison. I had to do something. I couldn't just wait for whatever was out there to find a way in. I pulled myself away from the door and glanced around the dimly lit room. My eyes fell on the old bookshelf in the corner. I remembered skimming it earlier. Maybe there was something there that could help me. I rushed over, the floor creaking under my weight, and began scanning the spines of the books. Most were dusty and covered in cobwebs, but one caught my eye. It was an old journal, leather-bound, with a faded title that read, "Folklore and Shadows of the Woods." An uneasiness crept over me as I pulled it from the shelf. I flipped it open, but gasped at the yellowed pages. Handwritten notes filled the margins, and there were sketches of what looked like the figure I had seen. I thumbed through the pages, skimming for anything useful. Then I found it, a passage that described something called the Wailing Spirit, known to inhabit these woods. It said that it thrived on fear, feeding off those who encountered it. The sorrow spot, I whispered, the chant echoing in my mind. It was a place where people had vanished, never to be seen again. A trap disguised as a clearing, pulling in the unsuspecting with its eerie allure. I clutched the journal tight. If I could find a way to counteract the spirit's influence, maybe I had a chance. Just then, I heard a noise from outside, a soft scratching, like nails on wood. My breath caught again. It was right there, hovering just out of sight. I darted to the window, peering through the thick glass, half expecting to see those dark, hollow eyes staring back. The trees swayed gently in the night breeze, but there was no sign of the figure. I felt a sense of dread wash over me. Whatever I had woken was patient. Suddenly, the journal slipped from my grip, falling to the ground with a thud. Panic surged as I dove to retrieve it. But as I bent down, I heard the door creak. My heart stopped. "Is someone in there?" I called out, but my voice trembled. I didn't want an answer. I felt the air shift around me, thick and oppressive. The whispers returned, now high-pitched and frantic. "It's hungry, it's hungry." I stumbled back, my mind racing. Was there a way to drive it away? The journal held clues, but I needed to focus. I flipped back to a section that caught my attention. A ritual, a way to bind the spirit. The instructions were vague, but they were my only hope. Just then, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching. They were deliberate, slow, right outside my door. I glanced out the window again, this time heart pounding in my ears. Then everything went dark. The lights flickered and died, plunging me into an icy blackness. A whisper brushed against my ear. "You've awakened it." In that suffocating silence, I realized I was completely alone.
An unsettling thought struck me. What if this darkness wasn't just a power outage? What if it was a way for the spirit to come for me? I waited for movement, for a sign, but all was still. The journal lay open on the floor, its pages fluttering as if beckoning me. I had to act now. I had to complete whatever ritual was written inside the fading ink. But as I reached for it, the door burst open with a crash. My heart raced as I turned to face whatever horror awaited me, ready to fight or flee. I blinked into the darkness, my heart pounding as I faced the open door. All I could see was a shadow, formless and shifting. I strained my eyes, trying to make sense of it. The whispering grew louder, swirling around me like a hurricane of voices, each one calling, dragging me deeper into fear. "Who's there?" I shouted, surprising myself with how firm my voice sounded, even with the tremors underneath. My gaze swept the cabin for anything I could use as a weapon. An old fire poker, a heavy book, but all I had were shadows and that journal. The silhouette in the doorway didn't move. I took a hesitant step forward, heart racing as I braced myself for a fight. Then the dark figure began to melt into the shadows, retreating as if pulled back by an unseen hand. Taking a shaky breath, I ran to the door and peered outside. The darkness enveloped everything. The trees were like black giants standing sentinel, but I saw nothing else. No creature, no sign of life, just that oppressive silence. I wasn't sure if I should feel relieved or more terrified. I backed away, feeling the walls of the cabin press in around me. I had to complete the ritual. I found the journal on the floor and opened it again, desperately searching for the passage on binding the spirit. I flipped through the pages, my fingers trembling as the whispers echoed in my mind. "Ward against it," I muttered, scanning for specific instructions. I needed to gather certain items: a piece of wood from a fallen tree, a strand of hair from a living creature, and a small offering. Just as I began to plan, a rush of cold air swept through the cabin, forcing the door shut with a resounding thud. I spun around, the sound reverberating in my ears. The air felt charged, thick with malevolence, as if the spirit were drawing closer. "Fight," I whispered to myself, drawing strength from the thought. I needed to gather those items before it was too late. I had no choice. I had to step out into the darkness again. I pushed open the door slowly, steeling myself against the weight of the unknown. With each hesitant step, the branches crunched under my feet, echoing in the stillness like a warning. The air was colder outside, and I could feel the presence lurking beyond the trees, watching. Moving deeper into the woods felt like stepping into another world. Every sound, every rustle of leaves sent waves of panic through me. The atmosphere pulsed with an energy I could almost touch. I forced myself to stay focused. I had to find that fallen tree, the wood that might save me. Then I noticed it. Lying against a giant oak, the wood was twisted and gnarled, but it would do. I bent down to gather it, heart racing. But as I reached out, I heard that whisper again, low and chilling.
You can't escape. I froze, the reality crashing over me like a wave. Whatever I had awakened was closer now, stalking me in the dark. I grabbed the wood and stood up, feeling it pulse with an energy of its own, a warning. Just as I turned to head back, I caught a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye. I spun around, breath fogging in the cold. That's when I saw it. A pair of glowing eyes peering at me from between the trees, filled with hunger. And I knew then I wasn't alone. I took a step back, the wood gripped tightly in my hands. The eyes in the darkness seemed to shift and narrow, almost a predatory gaze. Anxiety clawed in my insides as I realized I had to make a choice, run or stand my ground. "Show yourself," I yelled, trying to project confidence, even as my voice wavered. My pulse raced as I scanned the trees, but only the blackness answered me. The whispers grew louder, swirling, clawing at my subconscious, calling to me from the shadows. I could feel the unease creeping in, settling like a weight on my chest. I turned to dash back toward the cabin, nearly slipping on the fallen leaves and damp earth. But just as I reached the threshold, I heard rustling behind me. I risked a glance over my shoulder. The glowing eyes were gone, but now a chill ran down my spine. The forest felt alive, as if it were closing in. Rushing into the cabin, I slammed the door shut behind me, pressing my back against it like a shield against the darkness. I needed to gather everything I could. The journal lay in disarray on the floor, pages fluttering as if touched by unseen hands. "Focus," I whispered to myself. I flipped through it again, desperate. The entry about the binding ritual was right there, and I started to read it aloud, hoping the words would hold power. As I recited the instructions, the atmosphere around me seemed to shift. A bitter chill crept in, and I could almost hear a low growl emerging from the shadows. "Piece of wood, a strand of hair," I muttered, trying to remember. I needed to think clearly. My mind raced back to my encounter earlier. There must have been something I could use for the hair, an animal, maybe. I couldn't risk going back outside, but what if it was lurking nearby? Then I noticed the old fireplace. A clump of fur caught my eye, wedged between the stones. It was dark, matted. I knelt and reached for it, grasping it tightly. But as I stood up, the shadows in the corners of the room deepened. I could feel it again, that growing presence. Whatever was out there, it was relentless. The journal slipped from my fingers, landing open on the floor with a soft thud. Instinctively, I lowered my gaze, and that's when I saw it. A figure, dark and barely outlined against the wall, slowly materializing. I gasped, the breath leaving my chest. "Please, just leave me alone," I pleaded, stumbling backward. The whispering ramped up, a cacophony of voices swirling, and I felt my resolve weaken. The figure stepped closer, and I froze. It had no features, just an amorphous mass with those glowing eyes still locked onto me, burning like embers in the night. It didn't just want to terrify me, it wanted something more. I grabbed the wood and fur instinctively, steeling myself. "I'm not afraid of you," I called out, even as fear clawed at me. The moment felt electric, charged with something ancient and threatening. Then everything went dark. A shadow came alive, consuming the cabin, and I screamed as the air turned icy cold. In that moment of nothingness, I understood. I had no idea what I was truly up against. I stood there, enveloped in the darkness, feeling as though I was suspended in time. The cold seeped into my bones, making me shiver uncontrollably. I tried to blink away the pitch black, but there was nothing to see. No walls, no furniture, just an all-consuming void. I clenched the wood tightly, and it felt like my only connection to reality. "This isn't happening," I told myself, but I knew better. As I focused, I felt something shift in the shadows, almost like breathing, a slow, rhythmic pulse that seemed to match my own racing heart. I forced myself to call out again, my voice steadier this time. "What do you want from me?" Silence followed, thick and suffocating. I felt a shift in the air, like a heavy weight settling next to me. The whispers returned, a haunting melody, pulling me in from different directions. I wanted to cover my ears, but I couldn't move. I felt trapped, caught in a web of dread. Suddenly, the cold swirled against me, teasing at the edges of my senses. I willed it away. Images from the journal rushed back to me, snippets of words and phrases. "Binding ritual," I muttered, trying to anchor myself. "If I can just remember." A thought struck me. Wasn't there something about needing a personal connection? It seemed impossible. I didn't have anything of my own, but maybe, just maybe,
I could use the fur. The shadows shifted more violently, and I felt a presence lurking, waiting for my reaction. I thought about my family, my friends, and idea sparked. Perhaps I could bind it to something or someone else's essence. A feeling of desperation flooded through me. "I'll use this," I shouted into the empty space. "Whatever you are, I'll stop you." It was the bravest thing I could muster. I began to gather my thoughts about the words in the journal, mentally lining things up. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, the darkness lifted, leaving a muted glow creeping through the cabin windows. I blinked hard, adjusting to the dim light that returned.
The outline of the figure was gone, but the oppressive air lingered, thick and unyielding. I stumbled back to the journal, which had somehow remained open to the entry about the ritual. Scanning it again, I noticed a small detail. Something about timing, needing to complete the assault before dawn. Panic clawed at me. It was close to midnight. I had only a few hours. And just as my thoughts crystallized, the floor creaked ominously beneath me. I held my breath, listening intently. Was it fatigue, or was there truly something else there? The sense of being watched returned, concentrating on me with a dreadful intensity. I took stock of the cabin, desperate to find something else I could use. Another glance around the room caught my attention. A loose floorboard shifted slightly, and a flicker of light, a glint of silver, shone from within. It beckoned to me, offering a potential solution, or perhaps a deeper danger. I could feel it in my gut. Whatever was lurking in the shadows would not let me go easily. With urgent determination, I crouched down to pry the floorboard open, knowing full well that my time was running out. What lay beneath could either save me or seal my fate. I dug my fingers into the loose floorboard and pulled. It resisted at first, but the old wood finally relented, creaking loudly as it lifted. A rush of musty air escaped from the opening, and I squinted into the darkness below. My heart raced. The glint of silver flickered again in the sparse light. Whatever it was, it demanded my attention. I leaned closer, balancing precariously on the edge of the exposed wood. With a deep breath, I reached in. My fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. I grasped it and pulled it out from the shadows. It was a silver locket, intricately designed, its surface decorated with strange symbols. I turned it over in my hand, trying to make sense of it. The locket was heavy, and just holding it sent a shiver down my spine. I opened it, expecting a photo or some memento. Instead, it was empty. A flicker of disappointment washed over me, but instinctively I felt a connection. Maybe this was my link, my opportunity to bind the unseen presence to something tangible. And then a sudden chill raced through the room. The temperature plummeted. I glanced around, suddenly aware of the shadows creeping back along the walls. They stretched like fingers, reaching for me. The whispers returned, now more urgent, like a cacophony of voices clamoring for attention. Without thinking, I gripped the locket tightly and called out, "If you want something from me, then use this." It echoed into the oppressive dark, and for a heartbeat, the whispers faltered. I thought I saw a pulse of light in the corner of my vision. Suddenly, the temperature dropped further, stinging my skin. I backed away from the hole in the floor, clutching the locket against my chest. Fear surged through me. I could no longer deny there was something there, something powerful and vengeful. The darkness began to solidify, pulling away the light that clung to the cabin. My pulse quickened as I felt the weight of unseen eyes upon me, burrowing into my thoughts, waiting for a moment of vulnerability. "I won't let you win," I shouted desperately, my voice cracking. I remembered the journal entry about intention, about focusing on the essence I could bind. But how could I do that? The shadows swarmed closer, swirling and thickening until they almost enveloped me. Frantically, I searched the pages of the journal left open on the table, flipping through my urgent notes and sketches. One phrase stood out: soul offering. My breath quickened. The locket. Just as I was about to take a step forward, intending to throw the locket into the void, a deafening crash echoed through the cabin. Something had struck the door, rattling the entire structure. I froze, caught between two threats, the encroaching darkness and whatever was at the entrance. I had to act fast. Time was slipping away, and I felt the burden of every second. With all my might, I gripped the locket tighter and took a step toward the rising darkness, preparing to confront what lay within its grasp. That's when I heard the unmistakable sound of a growl. Someone or something was outside the door.
My heart raced as the growl echoed around me, reverberating off the walls of the cabin. I felt frozen, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. Had I imagined the growl, or was there truly something menacing lurking just outside? I could barely breathe. Peering through the dimness, I tried to gather my thoughts. The locket felt heavy against my chest, a weight that both grounded me and reminded me of my peril. I had to know what was out there, but stepping toward the door felt like inviting danger inside. The growl came again, lower and more menacing. It snapped me out of my hesitation. I fumbled with the journal, flipping through the pages for answers. The frantic whispers intensified, as if sensing my turmoil. "Focus," I whispered to myself. "You need to focus." The cabin felt like a trap, the shadows growing thicker, pressing in as if they wished to swallow me whole. I took a shaky breath and made my way to the window. Peering through the grimy glass, I could barely see beyond the edges of the porch. The moonlight barely filtered through the surrounding trees, but then I spotted it, eyes gleaming, reflecting the light. They were watching me. My stomach twisted in knots. It looked like a wolf, but something was off. Its fur was matted and dark, and it seemed larger than any animal I had ever seen. It stood motionless, growling softly, as if waiting for me to make the first move. I backed away from the window, heart pounding. What did the journal say about fear? I flipped to a random page and saw a drawing of a similar creature, accompanied by crammed annotations. Guardian, bound, need to offer.
The words twisted in my mind. I glanced at the locket again. Perhaps it wasn't just a trinket. Maybe it was a key. But a key to what? My thoughts raced as I weighed my options. Could I really use the locket to confront the mysterious presence, or was it just going to make things worse? Suddenly, a loud thud reverberated through the cabin as the creature lunged against the door. My breath hitched. The door rattled violently, threatening to break apart. I stumbled back, glancing at the journal once more. I had to act. Now. I gripped the locket with both hands, closing my eyes for a moment to steady myself. "If you want a soul offering," I said aloud, my voice steady but trembling, "then take this. I am ready." The temperature in the room dropped sharply, forcing me to shudder. With all the courage I could muster, I rushed to the door and swung it open. The chill of the night air gripped me like a vice, and through the darkness, the beast lunged forward. That was when everything went dark. I stood in the darkness, paralyzed by both fear and determination. The cold air wrapped around me, thick and oppressive. I could still feel the presence moving just outside the cabin, the growling deeper now, resonating in my bones. But I couldn't feel that icy grip I expected. Instead, there was a stillness, an echo of my own racing heart. "Show yourself!" I shouted, my voice trembling but louder than I'd anticipated. A rustle in the underbrush sent chills racing down my spine. The growling quieted. With hesitant steps, I moved into the night. The air was sharp and electric, and I held the locket like a beacon, hoping it would somehow hold the power to protect or bind whatever had haunted me. The cabin stood behind me, a silhouette of safety I could no longer rely on. Suddenly, the form appeared from the shadows. It wasn't just an animal anymore. It was a figure, a dark outline that stretched and twisted like mist. I squinted, willing my eyes to adjust, and there it was, that unmistakable featurelessness, those glowing eyes boring into me with a hunger that sent a wave of nausea coursing through my veins. In that moment, I remembered the journal. My heart raced as I recited the words from memory. "If you want a soul offering, take this," my voice rang out, desperation tangling with defiance. I lifted the locket and held it above my head, hoping it would draw whatever haunted this forest in. The figure recoiled slightly, as if my words had struck it. The shadows thickened around its form, swirling and swirling, the growl replaced by whispers, a sound like rustling leaves. "You awaken it. You awaken it." I pressed on, unwilling to back down. "This gives you nothing. I will not be your victim." As the whispers crescendoed, I hurled the locket forward into the depths where the figure loomed, the air crackling as it sailed through space. Time slowed as the locket sped towards its destination. It struck the ground, snapping shut as it hit the forest floor. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then, a loud explosion of light erupted from the spot, illuminating everything in a blinding glow. The forest grew quiet, the whispers halted, and for that brief moment, the darkness was cast away. But then came a howl, raw and echoing. The figure twisted and writhed, attempting to reform, but something was binding it. The light faded nearly as quickly as it had come, leaving only shadows behind, flickering in uneasy rhythms. "Stop!" I shouted instinctively, my heart pounding louder than the echoes of the haunting howl. "You cannot keep feeding on fear!" I was terrified, but I felt a strange connection to the locket still resting on the ground, as if it were a tether between our worlds. The growling became frantic, limbs crashing against the trees, a desperation that emerged from the depths of its void. And then, just as quickly as it began, it was gone. The presence vanished beneath the trees, retreating into the darkness, but I could still feel its weight pressing down on me, still shrouded in uncertainty. At some point, I staggered backward, back towards the cabin, breath sawing through my throat in gasps. The sun was edging toward dawn, pink light creeping through the trees. But even as I reached the door, heart still racing, a sense of dread anchored deep in my gut. I stepped inside, slamming the door behind me, but the sensation of being watched lingered heavily. I pressed my back against the door, realizing I couldn't shake the thought that perhaps I'd only delayed something greater. My skin prickled at the thought of what would happen next. Was the creature truly gone? Or was this only an intermission in this nightmarish performance? As dawn broke outside, casting new light into the cabin, my reflection in the window showed a haunted gaze staring back. I grabbed the journal, flipping through the fragile pages. The ink seemed to dissolve into shadows with each passing moment, losing its clarity as if it too feared the unknown. But nothing would ever be the same again. I knew deep down that this awakening had left its mark not only on the woods, but on me as well. I had escaped for now, but a question had emerged. What else was out there, waiting for the next curious soul? I moved to my car, its reassuring familiarity casting a flicker of hope amidst the lingering dread. But as I pulled away from the cabin, glancing back at the looming trees, I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling. I still think about it sometimes, the cabin, the whispers, and those hollow eyes that watched me from the darkness. I sold that car when I returned home, and I haven't been back to those woods. Each time I hear a rustling leaf or a distant call in the night, I remember, and I wonder if the shadows still gather in that lonely clearing, waiting patiently for their next visitor to share the fate of those who had vanished before.